Jesus said, "Whoever welcomes a child welcomes me," in Matthew chapter 18. Children are our present and our future, our hope, and our teachers and our inspiration. They are full participants in the life of Suamico United Methodist Church and in the realm of God. Jesus also said, "If any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones, it would be better for you if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depths of the sea." Matthew chapter 18 again. The social principles of the United Methodist Church state that children must be protected from economic, physical, and sexual exploitation and abuse. The Book of Resolutions of the United Methodist Church from 2016 states, "United Methodist congregations will categorically oppose the practices of adult, youth, and child bullying." God calls us to make our churches safe places, protecting children and other vulnerable adults from any kind of abuse. God calls us to create communities of faith where children and adults grow safe and strong. Therefore, in covenant with all United Methodist congregations, we adopt this policy for the prevention of all types of abuse of children, youth, vulnerable adults, members of our congregation, staff, volunteers, and guests at Suamico United Methodist Church. Hello, and welcome to our Safe Sanctuary Policy training here at Suamico United Methodist Church. We're delighted that you have a heart that would like to serve people in our congregation who are kids, youth, or vulnerable adults. We are delighted that you want to be part of our ministry and help support the spiritual growth of people at our church and in our community. So today we'd like to cover just a few things that are important to us about keeping everyone safe. It's our purpose and our intent as Suamico United Methodist Church to provide a safe and secure environment for teaching and caring for the children, youth, and vulnerable adults of our faith family. Our goal is to protect minors or vulnerable adults from any type of inappropriate sexual behavior, molestation, abuse, or neglect by employees or volunteers of our church, and to protect our employees and volunteers from false allegations. So, in a nutshell, what we're trying to do here is to keep all of our people safe because we believe this is a biblical mandate that comes from Jesus himself. We want to raise each child and vulnerable adult in faith, and it is part of our baptismal covenant as a faith community. The General Conference of 1996 for the United Methodist Church mandates that every United Methodist Church have a policy for providing safe ministry to children, youth, and vulnerable adults. We want to protect our volunteers and children and vulnerable adults in all cases of allegations of abuse. And our insurance company requires that we have a policy as a condition of coverage. Now for a few quick definitions, just to make sure that we are all on the same page. I'd like to first talk about who the different people are that we will be referring to when we're talking about safe sanctuaries at our church. An employee is anyone who is paid by the church on a full-time or a part-time basis. A volunteer is anyone who's not paid by the church, but is serving in a position involving the supervision or custody of children or youth, minors. A minor is anyone who is under 18 years of age or over 18 or over if they are still attending high school. A child is someone between the ages of birth and 11. A youth are ages 12 to 17 and age 18 when still enrolled in K-12 education. An adult is anyone 18 years of age and older who is not enrolled in high school. A vulnerable adult is anyone 18 years or older, no longer in high school, but who is at increased risk for abuse or neglect because of physical, mental, or cognitive disabilities. Qualified. A qualified person has completed the application process, has completed approved background checks, and our Safe Sanctuary training, which are all required to work with minors and vulnerable people under this policy. A leader is anyone personally responsible for supervising or overseeing a specific church-related function, event, or activity. Now for a few more definitions about the behaviors that we are trying to prevent in our ministries here at Suamico United Methodist Church. Appropriate means conduct that one understands would be acceptable and permissible by a child's parent or guardian. Abuse means harm or threatened harm to the health and welfare of a child, youth, or vulnerable adult by any person responsible for the health and welfare of that child, youth, or vulnerable adult. Sexual contact means the intentional touching of the intimate parts or the clothing covering the intimate parts of a youth, child, or vulnerable adult. Sexual exploitation means allowing, permitting, or encouraging a vulnerable adult, child, or youth to engage in prostitution or photographing, filming, or creating electronic or computer-generated images depicting a child, youth, or vulnerable adult engaged in actual or suggestive sexual conduct. Sexual harassment means any sexual advance or demand, either verbal or physical, which is perceived by the recipient as demeaning, intimidating, or coercive. Emotional abuse is the verbal or nonverbal conduct, including mental exploitation, degrading communication, or humiliating or threatening conduct that may or may not include bullying or as defined by state law. Our policies and procedures will apply to all people who give supervision or have custody of minors or vulnerable adults, or who have the opportunity to have contact with minors or vulnerable adults in church facilities or church-sponsored activities. It doesn't matter if they are clergy, paid staff, or volunteer, these policies apply to everyone. This policy will address 4 areas that are critical for the protection of our children and vulnerable adults, our employees, and our church. We will be covering the selection process, the protection policy, the reporting procedures, and the responses to allegations. So first, our selection process. For employees, whether they are current or new employees, all of them will receive a written job description. Each one of them will complete an employment application form that includes 3 reference checks. They will complete a clear background check. They will complete a clear driving background check if their responsibilities involve driving minors or vulnerable adults anywhere around. They will undergo a personal interview and be approved by a supervisor for employment. They will attend a Safe Sanctuaries training session, and they will renew background checks and Safe Sanctuary training every 2 years. The selection process for our volunteers is quite similar to that for our employees. They all need to complete a Safe Sanctuary application form. They complete a clear background check. They will need an additional driving background check if there are any responsibilities that include transportation. They will attend Safe Sanctuaries training. They will be approved by a program supervisor, and they will renew their background checks and Safe Sanctuary training every 2 years. In addition, for volunteers, they need to be active in the church for at least 6 months. Now, these are our regular and occasional volunteers. For volunteers that come at the last minute, for example, perhaps it is people who are helping out with our community disaster shelter program. They must be a known individual to at least one of the qualified leaders present for the activity. They may only work under the supervision of the qualified leader while present and with the qualified leader's consent. The volunteer must complete the requirements for a regular and occasional volunteer in order to volunteer again, and they must have been active in the church for at least 6 months. In the case of last-minute volunteer situations, we will have the Safe Sanctuary policy training video available, and all of the last-minute volunteers will be required to watch that video before they participate as a volunteer in the activity. Our Safe Sanctuary policy has a number of elements to protect the people in our ministries. Our first is the 2-adult rule. 2 non-related, non-cohabiting adults must always be present in groups of children or vulnerable adults. Hallway floats may be used when needed when a second adult is unavailable. For the age of our people, the employees or the volunteers, all persons working with minors unsupervised will be 18 years of age or older. Youth ages 16 to 17 may be utilized when under the supervision of a qualified adult leader who is in the building at all times. Staff and volunteers must be at least 5 years older than the minors they are working with. Youth and young adult assistants may not provide counseling or disciplinary actions. 6-month rule. Volunteers working with children or vulnerable adults must be known and in good standing for at least 6 months before working independently. The fourth item is parent consent and participation records. Parents will complete an enrollment form with consent once per year. The church will maintain a file of participation attendance for 3 years. The next protection rule we have is child ratios of employees or volunteers to the children. For the nursery, we want a ratio of 2 supervisors to employees or adults for every 6 children. So this is up to age 24 months. For preschool kids ages 2 to 5, again, we want a ratio of 2 to 6, 2 adults or volunteers, employees or volunteers to 6 children. For elementary age kids ages 6 to 11, we are looking at a ratio of 2 to 10, 2 employees or volunteers to every 10 children. For middle school, grades 6 to 8, 2 supervisors, employees or volunteers to every 12 kids. And for youth grades 9 through 12, the ratio is 2 to 16. Windows and open doors. All rooms where minors or vulnerable adults are meeting will have windows in doors or walls, half doors or open doors for all teaching and learning activities. For youth counseling and mentoring, when circumstances dictate that discussion is most effective on a one-to-one basis, a church staff member or volunteer may meet individually with a child or youth. The location of the session may be either at the church building in an area visible to other adults or staff person, or consider meeting at the child's home with a parent or guardian present. Following the 2-adult rule, another staff volunteer must be present in the building nearby at all times and must know this meeting is happening. Finally, LGBTQIA inclusion. The church welcomes the safe and full inclusion of all people in church ministries and activities. Bullying is not allowed for any reason, including gender identity and sexual orientation. Leaders and supervisors will work with participants and parents and guardians to ensure proper resources and support when needed. When it comes to overnight activities, especially for our children and youth, if it is a hotel setting, we want to provide a separate bed for each person. No adults will be sharing a bed with a child. If possible, choose hotels with rooms opening to an inside hallway. If it is a bunk room type of setting, at least 2 same-gender adults may sleep in a large room with multiple bunk beds. If only group showers are provided without individual stalls, adults will not shower at the same time as children or youth. If participants are of both genders, then there must be an adult of each gender present on the trip. Off-site trips must provide specific information. Parents must receive contact information that includes the start and stop times, the location of the event, the program content, the lodging information, and the covenant rules expected of their child. Staff and volunteer or drivers must also receive all contact information for parents, a signed parent-guardian liability form that is completed every year, health emergency information completed every year with updated as needed, and copies of the forms will be kept in the church office with the permission slips for 3 years after the event. Supervising volunteers and staff should also have a copy of the documents with them on the trip. When it comes to transportation needs for a church activities, drivers must have a valid driver's license and automobile insurance and have completed a driver's license background check. The minimum age for drivers should be 25 whenever possible, but no less than 21. Youth with a valid driver's license may drive themselves to local youth events, but may only have immediate family members as passengers if parent permission to do so is verified by the event leader. Everyone should wear seatbelts. No one under 85 pounds should sit in the front seat. If a charter bus is rented, ask the coach company if a background check is done on their drivers. If not, another charter company will be utilized. For outside groups that are using our church's facilities, it is recommended that the local church's Board of Trustees and Safe Sanctuaries team require that all outside organizations review and agree to comply with all of the church's Safe Sanctuary policies. The outside group should provide their own background checks and train their own leadership. Documentation of their agreement that they have received a copy of the church safe sanctuary policy should be kept on file in the church office. In addition, our building use policy requires that all outside groups provide documentation of their own insurance coverage. Now, our safe sanctuary policy is a difficult policy to think about because we don't want to think about the risks that could come to the children and youth that we love or the vulnerable adults who are important in our lives. But one of the things that we also have to consider is the role of sexual offenders, especially ones who have completed their sentences and are returning to community life. We are a place of grace as well as a sanctuary for vulnerable people. We want to provide spiritual care for all people, but some will need to agree to accountability boundaries for everyone's safeties. Suamico United Methodist Church may allow a person known to be a sexual offender to remain or become a member of our congregation, but they must adhere to specific guidelines. The church will first check with the offender's probation or parole officer for any restrictions regarding attending services or other functions where children are present. We will be asking the probation or parole officer to put any restrictions in writing for our records. If the restrictions do not prohibit offender participation, the following additional 4 requirements must be implemented and remain in force at all times involving any known sexual offender. First, the convicted sexual offender cannot participate in any of the child or youth programs in any way. Second, the convicted sexual offender can only participate in a predetermined service each week. Third, the convicted sexual offender must report in and be assigned to an escort who will accompany them at all times. And fourth, the congregation needs to be made aware that a convicted sex offender is attending. However, the name does not need to be disclosed. In keeping with Christian beliefs that children should not be abused and neglected, Suamico United Methodist Church will practice and advocate compliance with the Wisconsin state law requiring reporting of suspected abuse and neglect of all minors. Allegations of suspected abuse or neglect will be reported to the pastor. The pastor will report to local law enforcement, the district superintendent of the United Methodist Church, and our insurance company if not already contacted by the superintendent's office. This will be completed within 24 hours of the reported allegation. If the pastor is accused of abuse, the Staff Parish Relations Committee chair should directly report the incident to the district superintendent of the Wisconsin Conference of the United Methodist Church. When it comes to how we respond to an allegation of a problem, we want to provide a quick, compassionate, and unified response to all alleged incidents of abuse at a church facility or a church program. All allegations will be taken seriously and grace will be shown to all parties. The pastor will yield to the district superintendent. Church staff are not to undertake an investigation of the incident. However, in all cases of reported or observed abuse in a children's activity or involving a vulnerable adult, all those present should be at the service of the official investigation agencies. The church will keep a Christian perspective on how they portray the incident to the community. The church will let the law decide the truth, show respect to both parties, and as a community of faith, vow to keep these matters private. Thank you for taking the time to learn about our safe sanctuary policies and procedures that we are using to keep everyone at our church safe and to maximize the spiritual growth that everyone at our church can experience. All safe sanctuary training is required for all staff and volunteers working with children and vulnerable people in any program at our church. Keep in mind that at the completion of your training, you will sign a safe sanctuary agreement and a record of your completion will be maintained here at the church. Everyone is required to go through this training every 2 years, including the background checks, to make sure that we stay up to date and keep everyone safe. We really appreciate your time and we look forward to working with you in ministry here at our church. Thanks so much.